Welcome to Popcorn Planet. I am Andy Signor, and the trial of Kevin Spacey is underway. And to break it all down, I brought in celebrity divorce attorney Christopher Melcher. Thank you for being here, sir.
Well, thanks, Andy. I've been following this story. I know you have also, and unfortunately, it's in federal court, so it's not televised. So there's a delay here in getting some of this information that we want to share with you.
Got it. So, all right. So that's what it's not televised. That was a question I was going to ask. Why it's not? Well, that explains it. In federal cases, I guess they can't do it. But before we get to sort of the latest, I think it's important you go back. You did a thread on this, which was pretty interesting because it breaks down sort of the accusation and then what he did and why he was ordered to pay $30.9 million to the House of Cards producers. Back when all these accusations came out, he lost that, I guess, right, and had to pay Netflix for this that happened.
Yeah, it's an important part of this story that's going on in a civil case right now by Anthony Rapp, who's an accuser from 30 years ago. And when news broke of this through a BuzzFeed article by a reporter, Adam Very, and that also comes into this trial, it was explosive. And Spacey was doing the House of Cards series, and, you know, this is, like I say, explosive allegations being brought out. And
on their lead star producer of their biggest show. Yeah, not a good look.
It was huge. And so... And this is always a problem that anyone facing allegations has to decide. Like, do you sit back and just let the story unfold and present your case in court or to the police, or do you go out on social media and give a statement? So Kevin Spacey decided to get ahead of it and give a statement. He's testified now very recently in this trial that he felt pressured to give this statement that you have on screen, and is basically trying to backtrack a little bit because it's being used against him. So
well, let's reiterate. He says, I honestly do not remember. I was horrified to hear the story. I do not remember the encounter. It would have been over 30 years ago. But if I did behave then as he describes, I owe him the sincerest apology for what would have been deeply inappropriate drunken behavior. And I'm sorry for the feelings he describes of having carried with him all these years. I mean, that's a hard thing to take back. Is that not an admission? Even if he's blaming it on drunken behavior, Christopher, how do you take this back?
So it's a very odd statement because he doesn't admit to anything. He says he doesn't remember. And that's causing problems for him now at this trial because, again, these allegations is from 1986. So, you know, this is a very long time ago that this, 30 years ago, that this allegation is now being made. And he's saying, I don't remember. And so that's a big problem for him because if he now is coming into court and saying, I did not, well, if he's denying it flatly, this never happened, well, that would mean that he remembers what happened 30 years ago and vividly is saying, this, I can assure you, jury, this never happened. Well, his statement that, again, was, I'm very sure, rushed to get ahead of this story says, I don't remember. So he's caught in a bind, and and he's trying to do in court right now is saying, yeah, hey, I was rushed to give that statement. I was under pressure from these producers. I was on this show. I didn't want to lose everything. So I came out with a statement and it was imperfect. So he's trying to explain it there. He's also, what's odd about the statement is saying, if I did these things, and I'm not saying I did, I must have been drunk, which is a very weird statement. So is he saying that he was the entire year of 1986, he was so drunk that he might have done these type of things,
right?
And it's like, okay, we've all been drunk, or most of us have been drunk, and that doesn't lead us to attack people,
right? So,
or hopefully not. So it's an odd statement, and then he follows on, and where he comes out as gay. Right. And he was deeply criticized for the timing of that announcement. And people thought that he was trying to gain or garner sympathy or deflect by saying, hey, I'm coming out as a gay man. But I kind of think also what was happening is because these allegations were coming out, him against another man, he had hidden the fact that he was gay. He had testified now in this trial that he felt a lot of shame because his father was really not.
Yes, you can see the headline. Yes.
and so he really had no opportunity other than to out himself in that statement. So, like I say, it's easy to criticize. I mean, I don't know, what.
This all feels like he's got some which he does. He has very expensive lawyers, and they clearly have to chip away at the things he said previously that don't add up, is what it feels like to me, right? Because when you look at this statement, sure, we're here to criticize it. I'll do it, but you can't say they forced me to apologize and they forced me to come out as gay. It's just a weird, tack thing to tack on. It really feels personal, which makes me think, well, yeah, he meant to say this. In which case, if he said this, as you just said, well, you just admitted you may have done it and you don't remember. So therefore, you can't really say you didn't do it. And it sort of throws the whole case out open is what it seems like. He's in here saying, I was being encouraged to apologize. I've learned a lesson, which is to never apologize for something you didn't do. He then choked up and began to cry as he said it. It's my responsibility. I put it out there. It really was wrong. It was really bad. And I'm deeply sorry. I have to own that. Look, I've criticized Amber on the stand for not crying. I can criticize him, a man, for doing this too. He's a fantastic actor, Christopher. I don't know if I'd believe a single tear out of his face, to be honest, because this is a serious case he's got to push back against. Could this all just be performance and high caliber lawyers trying to discredit the things that are clearly not looking good for him?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know what happened, right? So none of us were there 30 years ago, and I'm just trying to put myself in his shoes at the moment, when he's, has these allegations made against him publicly. He's decided to come out and give a statement, which I think is a good idea. What do you say? So I guess that what he should have done is just flatly denied it if that's the truth, or admitted it if that's the truth, whatever. He should have just told the truth rather than being in this, if I did, but I didn't, or I'm not sure. I think that's the criticism of his statement, because I don't know what in the world he's saying. So yeah, it is being used against him. He is coming out on the defense. We can talk about his defenses, but maybe a little bit more on the background with House of Cards, because that's where my thread dealt with. And it's very kind of odd because these allegations come out. Initially, they're anonymous. And this BuzzFeed article by Adam Very, who's now going to be a witness in this trial, it was kind of anonymous. Anonymous people have come, unnamed people have come forward. And again, it's pretty hard if you're now, defending against that. And Adam Very, turns out, was a friend of Anthony Rapp. And there's text messages between the two of them that have been subpoenaed, and some of that's going to come out in the trial to show, like, well, there is a relationship here between the journalist who broke the story and the victim that was not disclosed. And some of those statements that are made in the text messages are about kind of sensationalizing possibly the story. Doesn't mean that it's not true, but it's not a great look. So what happened is that Netflix, the producer of House of Cards, came out this very quick. And as I think a second article came out, they said, you're done. You're done. There's no situation or no in which Spacey's going to have a continued role. So they canceled him off of the project, which is their right to do and may have been the correct decision. But what happened is they then turned around and sued him and saying, like, hey, you messed up our series because you did all these things 30 years ago that are just coming out now, and therefore we had to cancel the series. And Spacey,
wouldn't insurance typically cover that too?
Well, there may have been, and I don't know. I don't know that. I'm sure if there was, Spacey would have, raised that as a defense that they already got some insurance dough, but they came after him for $30 million for the cost of what they say they lost as a result of changing and ending the series because of these allegations. Spacey came back and said, look, even if I did all these things, it was 30 years ago. It had nothing to do with the production of this show or my character on the show, whatever. I mean, it's 30 years ago. So he went to arbitration, he lost, and now he has to pay the producers $30 million for what their alleged losses are based on the cancellation of the show. And as I've noted at the end of my thread, it's like it would have been nice had not that these producers, shouldn't get made whole, I guess, and they can make whatever claims they want, but they have not offered to give any of that money to the victims that they believe exist. And, it seems to me if they're going to get the $30 million, why not? And they're trying to do this to protect the victims if that's their
Right.
thing.
Interesting, yeah.
Then, hey, why not offer to help them somehow? But no word about that. So he got the Netflix thing. He's got to pay $31 million. He's got.
But this was not. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But it's as clear as you say it. This was also about him doing it to crew members on the show. It wasn't just about Anthony Rapp 30 years ago. Correct?
That's right. That's what I think killed it. It was Anthony Rapp. There were some others, and then crew members came out and said, "Hey, we felt harassed or unsafe on the set based on Spacey's conduct," and then he's done. But again,
and just for the record, my own clarity, like I wasn't there, but yeah, there's a lot of allegations about him, and I've heard through my own sources of people who've worked with him and had interesting encounters with him. I don't know. He's innocent until proven guilty, of course, but it does seem like he had a penchant for being around young people and such, and flirtatious and sometimes questionable on how the ages were. I have to be careful how I say it. So. Again, I don't know, but I know there's a lot of people in Hollywood who were sort of like, finally, when this sort of came out. But yeah, I mean, with all these accusations, this specific court case is about just Anthony, or is it about multiple?
This civil case is only by Anthony Rapp against Kevin Spacey. It is for money. It's not a criminal case.
Okay.
And so it's just him. Now, there was some evidence of another alleged victim who was mentioned at the civil case that, so that evidence did get in. But it's just Anthony Rapp suing Kevin Spacey for something that allegedly happened 30 years ago under a New York law that allowed these cases to be brought after so many years. And so in defense, so basically the allegations are in 1986 that Kevin Spacey and Anthony Rapp were both working on a play together, and that there was a party at Spacey's apartment, and that Anthony Rapp claims that Kevin forced himself on Anthony. And again, as a 14-year-old. Now, what happened here in defense is that Kevin Spacey called John Barrowman, who was about 19 years old in 1986, who was at the party. And John Barrowman testified that he was there and that it was Kevin Spacey and John who were intimate, being intimate with each other with their clothes on Kevin's bed. And when Adam saw them together.
You mean Anthony?
I'm sorry, yes. Anthony Rapp saw them together, and then John broke it off with whatever was going on with
Kevin.
With Kevin, and Anthony walked out. So that's Barrowman's recollection of that.
Does that help Kevin's case if there's a witness who's saying, well, he walked in and this is what actually happened? Or do you think that's going to help him?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, hey, it's good evidence. I mean, at least it's somebody there from 30 years ago that's saying like, hey, I was there, and I didn't see this incident contact between Kevin and Rapp. So that helps there. Also, that Anthony Rapp had said that, it was an adult party and it was getting a little bit too intense for him. And so he kind of retreated or went into a spare bedroom and just hung out and watched TV or something like that to kind of take a break from the party. But it was brought out that Kevin's was living in a studio apartment. So there's not even a separate bedroom. I mean, this is in New York. There's no 2-bedroom apartment here. This guy was a broke actor basically at the time. So he was contradicted there. Also,
that's not good either.
So Kevin Spacey's attorney brought out that this play that they were acting in together had a scene in it in which the husband mistook his son for his wife, and there was some kind of scene in a bed where the husband had
Yes,
some
okay,
kind of contact with
you
the son.
cleared it enough. Yep.
Yeah. So and so the allegation by Spacey's side is that Anthony
He's
Rapp
remembering that.
is kind of misremembering a scene in that play. Again, this is what lawyers do. You got to defend. You got to bring in the other side of the story. I wasn't there. I don't know what happened. I think if you just look at some of those facts that I brought out, there would be serious questions on credibility, especially for something that happened 30 years ago. But then when you look at, as we know, and the jury doesn't know, except for this one other victim or accuser that came forward, all these other accusers, we know of that as the public, but the jury gets shielded from that. So we got to keep that in mind as the outcome of the case, because we, as the court of public opinion, know about the UK case where he's, under criminal charges. He's going to face a criminal case in the UK for others that have accused him. He's got other people who have came forward publicly, not just Rapp, and told, like you say, similar stories. So court of a public opinion is probably going to convict him. But in this federal jury in New York, 30 years ago, contrary evidence being presented, you just don't know. Don't know what's going to happen.
It's also interesting. I was reading this article as we're talking, but yeah, apparently Anthony Rapp called him a fraud for not openly being gay, and it's like, what? That's a weird thing to say. And then Spacey, I do agree here, to call someone a fraud to say someone is living a lie. I wasn't living a lie. I was just reluctant to talk about my personal life. Yeah, I mean, to shame someone into saying you have to come out is a weird take from him during this, which going back to your thread, just reading this alone is very damning and hard to be like, well, dude, you admitted it. You don't remember, and you even are apologizing. So at the end of the day, whatever you guys think based on the evidence, it's hard for me to get past his own acceptance, right? His own words. But interesting to see the credibleness being put into question on the defense. There is obviously the UK trial. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to say I thought there was criminal charges facing as well, but that is in the UK. So this is not going to end quickly for Spacey. This is going to be a long road for him to attempt to get this all thrown out. Final thoughts on sort of Spacey's future at this trial and beyond?
Yeah, these are all hard. I mean, we've heard other cases where you have allegations that are brought from many years in the past under these laws, like in New York, that allow it to be done. And and it's like we see in the Masterson case. I mean, he's defending himself against allegations that were made in the 90s. So here are we're seeing something even earlier. And I understand from the accuser's standpoint, they've had to wait all that time to get justice. But then also from the accused standpoint, it's very difficult to defend yourself. And the final thought on it is it's not televised. And that's, I think really a failure of federal court, where they just don't allow it. But if you go back and think about Depp Heard, if that case had not been televised, as the UK case was not televised, where he sued the son, how much information would we really have sitting here about Depp Heard had it not been televised? Mm-hmm. And for me, I tried to refrain from making any judgment about that case, because again, I don't know those two people. I wasn't there, and I want to let everyone have their say in court. And it was really seeing Amber's demeanor on the stand and her contradictory statements, even on direct without being cross-examined, that convinced me that she was not being truthful. But I had to see that for myself. And here we're getting, after the fact, secondhand statements about what's going on in this courtroom. We can't judge credibility that way. So it's very, very difficult for us to know really what's going on in this manner.
Well said, sir. As always, if you like what Christopher says, go follow him over on Twitter, CA_divorce. Lots of great threads you can find over there as well. Appreciate you being here, Christopher, and I appreciate you guys for watching. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Hit the bell for updates on cases like this and more. We'll be live later today. You're not going to miss it. So make sure after you leave your comment, you click over. I'll put the live stream at the end of this. You can click over there on the left hand, right there. Oh, there it is. Click on the left. Join us later today live. We'll be there talking more about this and so much more. Thanks for watching, everybody.